I'm going to talk to Vicky at this point. Vicky from North Carolina, she, her. It says here, Vicky, quote, I am wondering if my belief in the word holds up. So do I understand that correctly? Why don't you explain to us what you're interested in talking about, Vicky?
Well, for one thing, I'm nervous. But the other thing is, I don't know. I've just gotten to where I cannot listen to preaching and sermons. And I've started listening to your atheist talks. And a lot of things that y'all talk about make sense. And I'm starting to see kind of the not holding up on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so that's concerning to me. So that's kind of where I am, but I still believe God is good. Gotcha. You know, and so I'm stuck because what y'all are saying makes sense when you ask questions to people that call in. And I've always had those beliefs too in the past about rapture, all these things that I believed in. But now I am really starting to question all of those things. And she asked me what I am, like, am I a Christian, or I don't know what I am.
Sure. That
that's kind of where I am.
Well, don't be nervous. We're just having a chat here. B, you are doing really well so far. You're expressing your position really well, and you're explaining to us your dilemma. And then C, you're not alone. This is a very common situation for a lot of people. And to me, it's a healthy situation. You should always question people who are making claims, you know, that the economy is getting better or not worse, or this person is a criminal or not, or this person, Jesus, was resurrected or not. All of those should be examined, right? Skeptically. And I think people cast the word skepticism or skeptic in a negative light in our society, and they misunderstand it a little bit. Skepticism just means, hey, I'm not going to accept a claim until I've become convinced through the proper amount of evidence. And then sort of the follow-up question is, well, what's the proper amount of evidence, right? What's enough of evidence to believe that that guy's a criminal, or the economy's getting better, or that Jesus was resurrected? And it sounds like you're in that space of, well, I'm starting to ask for evidence in my head, like, what evidence do I have that my beliefs are real? And now you're wondering what to do with those questions. Am I understanding you correctly?
That is correct. But where I was is I thought God was a tyrant, male chauvinist. I believed all those things for decades, to where I was even a housewife that believed in certain roles. And when I started to pick up the word, I was asking God, why do you hate me? Is it because I'm a woman? I saw how women were treated like cattle. I had all those. But as I read it, I saw a loving God, and I felt like I had been lied to all my life about who he was. So now I'm stuck in this thing where I don't believe what I've been told about God. But then at the same time, I hear y'all asking questions to people just like me. So I'm like so confused.
Understood. So let me ask John. John, I think, did you ever have a religious background, John? Were you ever in this situation?
Well, well, never this situation specifically, because I definitely have a different sort of perspective on it, being that, you know, I was a white Christian male. So like, as a Christian, like, I didn't notice all the misogyny and everything in that. I'm just kind of curious if I could ask a clarifying question there, Vicky. Are you saying that you were being told that God is a misogynist and that he's a horrible being and everything like that, but now after reading the Bible, you come to the conclusion that he's actually a good God? Is that the correct progression there?
I know that sounds crazy, but yes, it's like getting away from what I was being told. It's like, I know that sounds contradictory, but
so
like in Numbers 5, and that's
Numbers 5.
Yes, number 5 is about. It's about where the woman, the law of jealousy, and she has to drink the bitter water. Well, this woman goes and she's taken before the priest because she's thought to be an adulteress, and they do all this ritualistic things like putting it in a earthen vessel, making her drink. It's very demeaning. And I would go outside and I would just be like, who are you, God? This sounds satanic of what you would think would be done like in a back room somewhere, and it's in the Bible. And I questioned that for like a year. Like, why is this woman demeaned in such a manner that she has to drink? And if she's guilty, her belly will swell and her thigh will rot. But it wasn't until at the end of that where there's a woman that's proved not guilty and she produces fruit and she conceives. And I'm like, I thought that was describing the woman that's been made free. So that's what made me feel all of it.
Right. Well, I find it. I don't mean to be combative or anything, but I find it rather interesting that you've chosen the one story that could conceivably be about abortion, or purity culture and everything like that, but as opposed to like the slavery that God commands in Leviticus 25:44 through 46. Or what about how God, specifically commands Moses to go in and wipe out the Midianite people altogether, except for all the virgin girls, to force them into sexual slavery. To me, the bitter water or whatnot seems to be pretty mild as far as like atrocities go in the Old Testament, when compared to like these other things of the Bible. So I'm kind of curious as to how do you as far as your current view now of God being good, how are you rationalizing these Old Testament atrocities that are all over the Old Testament and this good nature of God?
I can tell you, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying this is spot on. I'm not going to ever be convinced that this is not right. I'm wondering if I've convinced myself of something also to be able to make it more palatable. So
what did you read? Specifically, you said, hey, I was told this, or I believed the bad parts, and then I read the Bible and I saw a good God. What specific, did you read the entire Bible? Did you use a study guide, or did you read the Gospels? What parts of the Bible did you read to convince you that God is good? The character of God, at least in the Bible, is good.
It was just learning like different words. Like, I think the first thing was I was going through having MS, and I went to the Bible and I was looking at the verses about God promises to heal you, promises to give you this, had all the verses posted. And I was convinced, because what I was hearing people tell me on the radio was that God would give me anything that I wanted. So then one day I sat down and actually started to read them for myself. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly what it says. It's not promising me anything and everything. So
verily, verily, if there are two or more of you ask for anything in my name, you shall have it.
Yeah, knock on the door shall be opened.
Verily means truly, truly, like not a metaphor, right? There's at least 5 that I can think of off the top of my head where God does say, or the characters in the Bible, Jesus or whomever, says, if you pray to move a mountain in real faith, you will move a mountain. Anything you ask, or if there's more than one of you, you shall get it. If you ask sincerely, you shall get it. This is a common. I've gone over this on my show. This is a common question that you ask people, and I'm interested to see why you think any other interpretation of that is true rather than the words that are printed on the page. The words that are printed on the page say, verily, hold on. Verily, verily, truly, truly. Yeah. Sort of literally, I'm not exaggerating here. You'll get what you want. And so I compare that text with the fact that I've never seen God heal an amputee, and I can't reconcile those two things. How did you reconcile those?
It's been a long journey. I'll give you one in particular that stands out to me, and that is in the New Testament with Paul. When Paul's talking to the Corinthians, and he tells them, he says that he will be weak that they may be made strong, and that he's wanting them to be better. To me, he's saying to them that I trust that you will see that I'm your brother. Even though right now you're thinking I'm not your brother, I'm a reprobate, they're like coming against him. But he's saying, I trust that you will believe and that you will see that I am a brother. I want you to be made strong. I will be willing to be weak. To me, that's giving anything you ask for in my name, because it's, to me, everything's centered
So
around
isn't that
brotherly love.
right? So isn't that taking
You get what I'm
one
saying?
story
Not.
that's hold on.
Yeah.
Isn't that taking one part of the Bible that's not related to Jesus saying, hey, if you pray for something, I'll give it to you? Isn't that taking one part to use it to modify another book that's written at a different time by a different person? Like, I'm very curious. This is a very interesting take. It sounds like you've got sort of a spot you want to get to, and you're searching throughout the Bible for pieces to get you there, rather than read the Bible cover to cover and come away with an opinion as to the story it tells and the characters in the book. Because when I read the Bible cover to cover, I didn't use a study guide. I didn't go to Bible study and read only the chapters the church wanted me to. I just read it cover to cover, and I realized, wow, in the Old Testament, there's a God character here that's like the most evil thing I've ever seen in literature. And it doesn't get much better in the New Testament, because now we've got the concept of hell and eternal damnation, which is infinitely worse than anything that he was going to do in the Old Testament. That's what I come away with. Even if he is occasionally saying, hey, while you own slaves, be nice to your fellow citizens. While you are forcing young virgins into sex slavery, give up your possessions, right? Just because you've got some nice stuff that you find over here doesn't mean it absolves you of all the evil stuff. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
I do understand. And that's what I'm saying, though, is that you can't capture it. And to me, and that's what I'm trying to, like, maybe little by little listening to what y'all have to say and your talks is kind of helped me to kind of question some of these things too. But I don't think I can capitalize. It's not just one book. It's not just one verse. It's the overall of it all. I mean, like this, like it explains to us what actually is a virgin. And I mean, I could go on and on about, we say God was talking about gender when he was talking about women, but there's also a whole study of what a woman means in the word. There is a whole study about a slave.
But let's be real here. Let's be honest, okay?
Yeah.
There's not very much disagreement amongst even Christian scholars about the things like, hey, the Bible endorses slavery, right? That you could own people, you could beat them to within an inch of their life, you could pass them to their children. If they were women, they were sex slaves, they were property, all of this sort of stuff, right? So let's give you your version of the Bible. There's 10,000, a million pages, and 999,999 pages say, be nice to each other and all that sort of stuff. And then on one page it says, but while you do that, you can own other people as property. You can beat them. You can rape them. Women are worth less than men. I'm not going to teach you about science. I'm going to put stuff in there regarding hygiene that would actually kill you. There's one page in there that's just awful, evil stuff. What do you do with that? Even if there's like 99.99% of it is good, which is not the case of the Bible. Doesn't that one section where this supposedly omnipotent, all-knowledgeable God is telling you all of this really horrible stuff to do, doesn't that make that character of that God, at least you have to question their understanding of the universe and humanity and morality?
But I feel like, and I'm just being honest, and this is why I'm confused, because when I called today, I didn't want to go and she asked me, what you want to talk about today? I'm like, I don't want to come on here with just one pet peeve. Sure. When you talk about slaves and stuff, I get what you're saying. But when I read it, when it starts to come out, I mean, when he says, I think that y'all have quoted, I'm not good at quoting like the actual verses, but about serve your masters, slaves serve your masters. But when he says you can't serve two masters, I mean, is he talking about slavery, what you're talking about, or is it me serving death and condemnation, or is it me serving life and forgiveness? I mean,
let's clarify what we're talking about, John. Hold on. Yes, I understand. So you're talking about the New Testament. We were talking about the Old Testament. We can get to the New Testament in a second. So, John, you had mentioned that. I don't remember the verses, but my recollection is owning people as property, right?
Right.
Exodus, Deuteronomy. There's multiple places where they talk about this.
Yeah, so there's Exodus 21 specifically says that you can own slaves as property, and then there's also Leviticus 25:44 through 46. It talks. God specifically says how you can go and you can purchase slaves from the nations around you. There's several different laws in the Old Testament that talk about how to treat your slaves and all this other stuff. I feel like you're being a bit anachronistic with this whole "you can't serve two masters" kind of thing, because I believe that was Paul, if I'm not mistaken, in the New Testament, that talks about how you can't serve two masters, and that's not talking about that's not like an anti-slavery sort of thing. That's more of like an anti-idolatry kind of verse there. Like you can't serve you can't serve money, like greed. You can't be greedy and also serve God. And honestly, that's just a way to separate the believers from their money.
Okay, but I'm just saying that there's tons of definitions for what, and to say, and I'm just being honest, the way I feel, what I was just thinking about when y'all were talking about, you can own somebody as property and make them your slave. But if we take into account, I was just thinking about this. Now, wait a minute. If you take into account that the slave, where it says that the slave is not in the house forever and it's the son, why would God be promoting slavery?
You tell us.
Slavery.
You tell us. And you're cherry picking a verse. You're cherry picking a verse. We need to explain for our viewers. Hold on, Vicky. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. You're cherry picking a verse.
Yeah.
We are talking about there. It's okay. I understand. And what you need to understand is the Bible is 60 something books written by different authors at different times over, many, many, many eons. All right. So what we are talking about is in the Old Testament, it says you can own people as property, and then it divides those people into two categories, right? Hebrews and non-Hebrews. Mm-hmm. Hebrews, you have to treat nicer than non-Hebrews. Right. Non-Hebrews, beat the hell out of them. As long as they live for 1 or 2 days after you beat them and then die, you're not guilty of any crime. You can beat them to within an inch of their life. You're fine. You can have the women become sex slaves. You own them. You give them to your children as property. They have no right to refuse anything you want them to do. That's what we're talking about, owning people as property. Do not try to shift to some other definition of non-biblical or in another book. We're talking about those people, the non-Hebrews around you, were treated like the slaves you see in many, many popular movies about modern slavery, of just cruel, inhuman treatment of property. Our question is, how do you reconcile that the Bible endorses that? It doesn't say don't do this. It says you may do this. And then when the New Testament comes along, nothing Jesus says, oh, remember those old laws about how you could own slaves? We're not doing that anymore. He does the opposite. He says, I'm here to fulfill the law. Nothing will change. Not a jot or tittle of the law will change until all has been fulfilled. And then we have the phrase from the New Testament that says, slaves, obey your masters as you would obey Christ. So Old Testament says you can be a cruel sort of Quentin Tarantino-esque slave owner character. And the New Testament does nothing to say no. In fact, it has this one line that slave owners in our Civil War times used to read to slaves to say, even the New Testament, when Jesus was around, is telling you, obey your masters. How do you reconcile that with a good God? That's our question.
Yes, and I read everything that y'all read, and I have all those same questions. I've went through those questions, even pertaining to my marriage. I had, when I've lived in this marriage to where I performed the wife role and I was the homemaker and all that, I see that. I've struggled with those same things that you're talking about. But that's what I'm saying. I don't know how else to say it, but I think that we can define, it's just like fruit. We can define it as let's stop using analogies and tell me what you're defining. You've gone to this definition thing a bit, but we haven't gotten to the point. What definition are you proposing in our words that we're using to describe slavery being endorsed in the Bible? What definition are you calling into question? The slavery? I don't think that God was talking about demeaning, chaining.
Will you be my slave? Will you be my slave under the rules of the Old Testament?
Why would you want me to be?
That's not the question. My question is, would you want to be my slave under the Old Testament rules for non-Hebrew slaves?
That's a good question, and I have to think about that.
I suggest you do.
Mean, really. I mean, seriously.
I can't hear you there, see.
Would I want to be? I would not want to be your slave. Of course not. I mean, of course not. Okay. That's not but I'm saying, I'm trying to see what you're wanting me to see.
I'm trying to say that's what morality is about. Do unto others as you would do unto them. The golden rule, like, don't own slaves because people who were slaves would not want to be slaves.
Well, so Vicky, do you understand?
Do unto others as you have them do unto you. I mean,
I'm comparing those two things, right? I'm comparing those two. Golden rule is found across religions and cultures, right? Many cultures have come up with that rule as an example of, hey, don't do something you wouldn't want done to you, or if everybody did it, it would be awful, or those sorts of rules. Just sort of shorthand bumper sticker logic for morality. And what I'm saying is, you just walked into that by thinking about it. All you did was think, and I congratulate you. No, I really wouldn't want to be a slave under the Old Testament rules. And then my conclusion is, well, neither did anybody else, right? Nobody wants to be a slave under the Old Testament rules. And yet the Bible says it is not only not horrible, here are the rules. Here's the how you do it. So I'm sorry, Godless Engineer was gonna come in. I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, so I get the feeling, Vicky, that you're trying to say that because God didn't say to treat slaves horribly or something like that, at least explicitly, that somehow it was a different kind of slavery. It was a better kind of slavery. And I just don't see that.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought that you were going that direction.
I don't believe in slavery.
You don't believe in slavery?
No, that's not what I'm saying. No, I'm saying that and it's just like when I go to a Christian board and I talk to Christians, I get the same thing from them telling me that it cannot be a different term. It cannot be a different type of slavery. It has to be, when you talk to them about certain words and say, let's look at these words, and it's just like physical healing and spiritual healing. And they don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about just what it promises them, and they see it as one thing. They see woman as one thing, they see slave as one thing, and that's the way it is. And that's what I'm saying, is that I feel like what I'm defending is that what if there's another definition, and is that not okay to say that maybe there is another definition?
Let's take that assumption. Let's go with that. Okay. So let's assume that there's a misunderstanding here, that there's a definition that's been lost in time. Even though just so we can agree on this, what the popular people in the pews think about interpretations of terms can be very different from the people who actually study these languages, who go in and look at translations of copies of transcripts that were passed down by oral tradition. They've gone and read everything that we have, the originals, on the actual clay tablets or whatever. Okay, so those people inform our understanding, but let's ignore that and say that there is some sort of misunderstanding here. My question to you is, the story of the Bible is a story of possibly the most important question in all of human existence, the story of a potential afterlife, living as long as you want to, or living as long as God wants you to. And even Christians, I think, agree it's the most important message ever. So if you've got a God character that is all powerful enough to have created this universe, where the visible universe has 2 trillion billion galaxies, and each galaxy has 400 billion stars in it, and they did all of that, don't you think it's a little odd that the way they chose to convey this message to you, Vicky, is through misinterpretations of translations, of copies of translations where we don't have any of the originals written down by anybody. They were all written by anonymous people well after the fact of Jesus's life. Is that the best way to convey the most important message in all of humanity, to the point where we could have a definitional misunderstanding about important terms?
I think about that every single day, because that's why I'm calling and I'm telling you that even though I may sound like, yeah, this is what I'm telling, I still doubt everything I'm saying myself, because what you just said and what I've heard from y'all, like, to be afraid that there is no God, that's scary. That's scary. Sure. And with me having hope, I tell my husband all the time, I get depressed. It's going to make me cry, because I really am scared, because the world, I don't feel like there's not a lot of stuff to be like hopeful and happy for. And I can't find, it's like I thought that was what I was finding in God. But then if there is no God, then I don't know what all this is even for. And I get your question that couldn't it, I mean, I think about that every day, that this is like a crap show. I don't even want to go listen to Christian or go to those sites. And that's why I ended up at y'all's, because I'm tired of hearing the same debate.
Let's hear from Godless on that.
Well, so I just want to, I understand that, you've been dedicated to God, like a good portion of your life. And so it seems very scary, this whole proposition that maybe God doesn't exist. But also when I left religion and I stopped believing in God, an entire world opened up for me, because I was predicating a lot of my actions and everything like that on this whole idea that I was going to get to go to heaven, or I was going to have this afterlife and everything. Once that was taken away from me, I was able to really focus in on everything that I have now, that I'm experiencing now, and really enjoying it, really appreciating it, because it's this is the only life that I have. This is the only experience I'm going to have. So, I need to be I want to be happy. I want to do things in my life that make me happy and that benefit other people and all this other stuff. So I feel like while it may seem scary now, this whole prospect of God not existing, I think that if you try to look at everything in your life without that lens of God on it, you'll see how full of a life you actually have, and how important it is to experience those things every day, and how the thing that makes this life have meaning are the experiences that you have. That this is the only life that you're going to get. So might as well make the best of it. And you don't need to worry about some misogynistic, God up there and everything. To touch back on the slavery and the definitions kind of thing, while there could be a chance that we're missing some kind of understanding from the Hebrew language about how they described slaves and all this other stuff, what we do know is how the slave trade existed in the areas around Israel in the ancient Near East. That's well documented. And the Israelites actually were either on par or just slightly worse than the surrounding ancient Near Eastern cultures. So when you're sitting there trying to figure out, well, what does God mean by slavery? What they meant at that time is going to be the same kind of slavery that every other person at that time, in that point in time in human history, meant by slavery. It was quite literally owning another person as property. Now, the ancient Near Eastern cultures, they had laws that either protected slaves or afforded slaves some kind of benefits. So that is still on par, like the Israelites' implementation of that is still on par with the ancient Near Eastern culture. So, I mean, slavery in any kind of sense where it's chattel slavery and not some ambiguous, super weird, kind of definition. It's going to be owning another person as slave and deriving benefit from their hard labor where they do not derive any benefit from it directly.
Yeah.
And so that is how we define chattel slavery, and that's how we define biblical slavery. So if you believe that God in the New Testament is the same in the New Testament as he is in the Old Testament and as he is now in the present day and as he will be in the future, then God is directly responsible for some slave trade, or all of the slave trade really, that was happening in Israel. Now, if you're not good with the slave trade, then I would say that you should probably not consider God good. If God is good, omnibenevolent and all that kind of good stuff, if he is that thing, then he should have definitely in the Old Testament said, hey, don't own people as slaves. But he didn't do that. Yep. So can you really consider him to be a good God if he's going to mandate things like sexual slavery, chattel slavery, genocide, all of these things? Can you imagine considering anybody a good person if they order you personally to go to the next town and slaughter everybody in it, including babies and small children?
Right. Yeah. Vicky, we've been on a while. I really, really, really like this call. But we do have to get on to other callers. I would suggest that you call back